Hello, Mr. Washington. Thank you for being with us.
My pleasure.
Good to have you. Yes. Welcome.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening. Welcome to everyone who's joining us in the virtual space. This is the I-5 Rose Quarter Historic Albina Advisory Board meeting. We're going to give members just one more minute. We'll begin at 4:05. I also see Leslie Goodlow. Thank you for joining us tonight. And Ms. Sharon Gary Smith. So glad to have you with us.
Hello, Miss Erica.
Yes, ma'am.
That yes, ma'am, and pearls.
You know, I've been rather proud lately.
I went out and bought some real ones this time.
Indeed. Indeed. Well, as promised.
Get a chance to congratulate you, Ms. Smith. Happy New Year, but congratulate you on that NAACP thing. Did you hear me?
So much. Wait 6 months. We still in Pluto.
Well, that's okay, but you know, somebody said you won. So it's good for you.
All the members, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Well, thank you to everyone who has joined us in the virtual space. Again, my name is Erica Warren, and I am a partner with Dr. Stephen Holt in Tri-Excellence. And we have been brought aboard this project, the I-5 Rose Quarter Project, as a strategic advisors, and I will be your facilitator for the Historic Albina Advisory Board. We want to welcome our public into the meeting as well. Dr. Carlos, I see you joining us. Thank you for being with us tonight. It's a pleasure to have you. I want to just briefly welcome all of you into the space for this conversation. It's important work that we're doing, so I want to thank you for your investment and your belief that we can do something magnificent together. Thank you for those who are joining us in the public space. We are going to have an opportunity for some public comment later in the meeting. Natalie, if you would begin sharing the slides for me, I would appreciate it. Next slide, please. Okay. Again, you all probably are Zoom experts by this time, considering we've been in this virtual reality for almost a year now, but make sure if you're not speaking, we'd ask you to keep your self-muted. And then for those of you who are participating, we would ask you to keep your video on so that we can engage with you as much as possible. Next slide, please. Just a reminder, we are live streaming and recording, and all of this is a part of the public record. We welcome the public to see as a outcome of our value to be transparent. We appreciate you for joining us. If you have extensive public comment, we want to let you know that there is an opportunity for you to email your comments to the info@i5rosequarter.org, as well as you can leave a voicemail to the number there. Tonight, we're going to be assisted by Erin. She will provide assistance for technical issues. The number is there on your screen, 503-479-8674. Please feel free to text or call Erin if you're having technical difficulties. Next slide, please. As I mentioned, we will have public comment today. The opportunity for them will be fairly short, but we do want to hear from you. Your voice matters as well. This meeting is about how we can engage together to provide benefit to the community through this project. So please govern yourselves accordingly if you would like to give public comment tonight. Next slide, please. All right, and briefly, we have a lot of information to cover with you tonight. We're going to have public comment, then we're going to have a brief review of the draft charter for this group, followed by a presentation from the Independent Highway Cover Assessment Team. And then we have an exciting presentation from the Eadlin team and the Paramount Parking Design, which I think will create a great opportunity for us to partner together. And then we will talk about our next steps. Next slide, please. Dr. Holt, will you walk us through our principles of agreement?
I'd be delighted. Thank you very much. As you see, there are 7 principles identified, and Eric has mentioned one of them on a regular basis. Your voice matters. That means we want to hear from you, your truth, your capacity, perspective, insight. And so speak your truth is principle number 2. Be honest, and we have no question that this particular group will be just that and give good and truthful feedback. Therefore, we ask that everybody listen for understanding. Principle number 3, that since everyone's voice matters and each person will bring their best self to the table, that we listen to each other to grasp and capture what is being said. Principle number 4, that we deal with issues and not people. We don't attack each other. We don't attack and come at each other in the old historic terminology sideways, but we create space for healthy dialogue to happen, which means number 5, you're going to experience potentially some discomfort. Conversation may become uncomfortable. And if that's the case, principle number 6, we ask you to remain respectfully engaged. Don't check out. Don't, kind of have that lights on, but nobody's home kind of experience. We want you to stay engaged. And so number 7, to expect and accept non-closure. We're not going to fix everything in a moment. We didn't get here in a moment. It's going to take us some time. And in that process, here are the things we commit to making sure that we can be transparent, accountable, and authentic.
Thank you, Dr. Holt. Very quickly, I'd love to just welcome all of the Historic Albina Advisory Board members. As I call your name, just by way of kind of a roll call to see who's in the room, please just unmute yourself briefly and give us a hello. Mr. Kevin Modica.
Present.
Good to have you tonight, sir. Pastor Richard Probasco.
Present.
Thank you. Mr. Carl Talton.
Present.
Thank you. Mr. John Washington. Mr. Washington, there you go.
What's that word they've been using? Present? Okay.
Pleasure to have you in the room, sir. Dr. Carlos Richard.
Here.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate you. Miss Leslie Goodlow.
Present.
Thank you for being with us, Miss Leslie. Miss Estelle, great to have you tonight.
Hello.
Thank you. Miss Sharon Gary Smith. I know she's here. Well, I've acknowledged her. I'll come back to her. Mr. Keith Edwards.
Here.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate you being here. Mr. Andrew Campbell.
Here.
Great to have you. Is Srinivasa Brown, has she joined us yet this evening? Mr. Andrew Clark?
I'm here.
Thank you. Good to have you tonight, sir. Is Miss Serena Stoudemire Wesley, has she joined us yet this evening? I will definitely acknowledge her and Srinivasa as they join us moving forward. Next slide, please, Miss Natalie. Next slide. Well, this is your opportunity to speak with us this evening in regards to our agenda moving forward. We're engaging in our public comment section. If you do have a public comment, please dial in the number there, the meeting ID. You can raise your hand and acknowledge. Natalie will be assisting me. There will be a 1-minute timer for you. Please, we appreciate that you are going to help us be respectful of time and keeping your comments to the 1 minute. We appreciate your understanding if we have to move forward with the next comment. Definitely, if you have a more engaged, robust discussion, you can email those to the email address that I mentioned forward. Miss Natalie?
Thank you, Erica. I am just looking out in In the waiting room, we have two, I think, members of the public. So I think I'll just go ahead and admit them if that works for you, Erica. We are also accepting other people calling in, as you mentioned, and using the information shown on the slide. So I'll go ahead and admit Aurelia Marine. And Aurelia, did you have a public comment? If so, please raise your hand, and then I will admit this number ending in 7867. And if you have a public comment as well, please also raise your hand. I'm going to go ahead and share a timer. Our public comments today will be limited to 1 minute in duration. So I will go ahead and share on my screen the timer to keep us on track. And with that, Aurelia, I will ask you to unmute and provide your comment.
Hello, my name is Relia. I'm 13 years old, and I'm here to stand up for my future. The I-5 freeway expansion is wrong. Harriet Tubman Middle School already has close to the worst air quality in the state. Expanding a freeway closer to it will only make things worse. Making I-5 bigger will not help the community impacted by I-5. Making room for more cars will not help the planet. We are in the middle of a climate crisis. This freeway expansion is absurd.
Thank you for that comment. I am going to go ahead and look for any other hands raised, and not seeing any.
Actually, Natalie, I believe I see a hand raised with the phone number 734 ending in 7867.
Oh, yes, thank you for that. I will go ahead and ask this person to unmute. Okay, phone number ending in 7867. Could you please unmute yourself, state your name, and provide your comment?
Phone number 734 ending in 7867. Oh, yes, thank you for that. I will go ahead and ask this person to unmute.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh. Could you please unmute yourself?
Seems like we have a little bit of an echo.
Hi, my name is Claire Vlach, and I was a member of the I-5 Rose Quarter Community Advisory Committee. Odot disbanded us in September after we met just 4 times because we asked them difficult questions that they didn't want to answer. Odot repeatedly told us that they valued our opinions, but when we tried to share our thoughts about the freeway widening, they told us that we had no say on that part of the project. And when we asked Odot to reconsider building a project that would increase air pollution and carbon emissions and cost $750 million, we were told that, quote, "This project is happening no matter what." Here are some of the questions that Odot refused to answer for us, but that I hope they'll answer if you ask them. Will we have a say on how Odot prioritizes air pollution and climate change when designing this project? Will we have a say on the width and number of lanes on the proposed freeway? Can we build the freeway caps and other neighborhood improvements without widening the freeway? And for all those questions, if you don't get a say, why? Why did the committee get a say? I hope that Odot will treat you with more respect than they treated the community advisory.
All right, and I'm not seeing any other comments, any other raised hands, so I will go ahead and stop sharing this. And I didn't miss any, did you see any additional comments or raised hands that I missed, Erica?
I do not, Natalie. Thank you so much.
Excuse me, you know, I think we were allotting 5 minutes and we only had 2 speakers. And so I really would like to go back to that previous speaker, the second one that spoke, because they weren't finished. And if we have 5 minutes, we need to make sure that we use that time, wisely. If we only had 2 folks, they should get 2.5 minutes apiece.
I appreciate your thoughtfulness, Mr. Edwards. We just want to stay consistent with all of the other advisory groups. And definitely Claire is valued. We appreciate her comment. She has submitted most of her testimony in writing, and it was provided to you in email. And so I want to make sure that you all are aware of that. Please take an opportunity. Claire and Aurelia, thank you for your comments this evening. And again, if you have additional things that you'd like to share, feel free to email them and we'll make sure we do our best to address them. Thank you, Mr. Edwards. I'd like to move forward. Next slide, please, Natalie. So I want to share with you the Historic Albina Advisory Board in relationship to the charter and how we would govern ourselves as we move forward in helping to give voice to the community for the I-5 Rose Quarter project. For our last meeting in January, you were sent a copy of the charter. I also resent it today and wanted to take a little bit of time just to see if we had any questions in regards to this and highlight some areas for you. In regards to obviously the overview, it gave us a rundown of the makeup of all of the advisory boards that the I-5 Rose Quarter has pulled together to bring community perspective into this project. The vision, values, and the principles of agreement, we went over those in our last meeting. Restorative justice, transparent decision-making, we want to make sure that every project, every community advisory group is functioning out of those values. The purpose of the group, I believe that we stated we want to bring voice to the Black community. We want to have your input in regards to benefits that can be afforded the community if we have this collective brain trust and hold Odot accountable to the values. Obviously, you all are aware of the membership. I appreciate all of you for committing your time to being here with us. The next piece, which is decision-making and accountability, I'd like to just spend a bit of time on. Natalie, if you could move to the next slide. As Project Director Megan Channel mentioned, as well as Steve Drahota, who's one of the engineers on this project, there are several project elements that we will be looking for this group to provide input on. One of those in particular is the highway covers, and I know that that is getting a lot of attention, but we want you to know that there are other aspects of the project that we definitely want the community's input on. So highway covers, and you'll be receiving some information from our independent assessment team this evening, as well as the multimodal local street improvements, the I-5 main line, as well as the pedestrian, biking, street improvements. All of those areas will be areas we want you to think about, to speak to bring your experience, your voice from the community into the project on. Next slide, please. In regards to priorities for the group, one of the things I'd like to dive into and get your feedback on is how we would like to govern ourselves. There are 2 other kind of community advisory boards for the I-5 Rose Quarter, the COAC, which is led by John L. Bell, and the Executive Steering Committee, the ESC, which is led by Dr. Stephen Holt. Both of those groups have adapted the values of the project and are governing themselves in a particular way. And we'd like to establish for ourselves how we plan to govern. So there are a couple of options I would like to present to you all for you all to give me some feedback on and maybe to take some time to evaluate. whether or not you all would like to continue as we are at this point, which is kind of an equal footing with facilitation, where I would help us guide through each of the steps to bring us to outcomes, or whether this group would like to identify a chair and a vice chair. One of the benefits of that would be in regards to some of these priorities that we have coming up, which are some subcommittees in relationship to the cover assessment. There are some newly formed groups that have been approved by the Executive Steering Committee, a joint subcommittee that would have representation from this board as well as the Executive Steering Committee that would meet frequently with the independent cover assessment team in order to bring insight into that process, which will be reported to the Hc3, which is all of these acronyms, right? Highway Cover Committee, which has partners regarding this process: Metro, I-5 Rose Quarter, PPS, TriMet. All of those groups meet together on a regular basis in order to facilitate the work of this project. And we have an opportunity as the HAAB to have representation on those groups. So at this point, Natalie, you can move forward to the next slide. I'd love to be able to open the floor to the HAAB in regards to how you all would like to govern yourselves as we move forward in this process. Are there thoughts, comments? Ms. Sharon?
Of the two scenarios you just now painted, if I heard them correctly, one would be continuing in the structure that we have now, where you're guiding and informing us and we're moving through an agenda. In the second, you talked about us having selected leadership of our group, and then also looking at the places where we would more actively be engaged in these other bodies.
Yes.
A lot of engagement and a lot more work, if I'm hearing you.
Yes, ma'am.
Able to, with the current structure, be able to have those kind of opportunities, or we need to pick?
That is a great question. That opportunity is still available. It is up to this group to determine how they would like to function. If this group decides we do not want to move forward with a selected chair and vice chair, there could be opportunity for, say, rotation of those responsibilities. The subcommittee will be jointly meeting with the ICA team as well as members from the Executive Steering Committee. And I think it is definitely a wonderful opportunity for those who would want to and who have the time to be able to lend their input there, who would serve as liaisons back to this group in regards to the furtherance of the work that's being, discussed at a more deep and intimate level. And so no, there is not a one or the other. I think we can decide amongst ourselves how we would like to move forward. Other thoughts, questions?
We only had one meeting. This is like our second, and so I would want a little bit more seasoning with others, but
Yes.
that's just the whole.
Yes.
I have a question, well, two questions.
Yes, ma'am.
In regards to looking at those two different structures, how do the differences impact decision-making? Would it change with having a chair and co-chair? Would it go from a consensus model to somehow something more hierarchical? That's my first question. And then my second question is more so around the different groups that you mentioned. I'm wondering if anyone has had the opportunity to look at the background and makeup of our group compared to the committee and try to strategically see, like, is there a lens as to which ones we might have the most impact or why we would select it versus us just looking at a list and saying, oh, this one sounds interesting. So those are my two questions.
Great. And if I heard you correctly, so the first question that you had was regard to whether or not we would change kind of the consensus structure. And I don't believe so. The chair and vice chair kind of leadership roles is if this group decided maybe there were those who wanted to engage more deeply and agenda creation, again, participation in some of those additional subcommittees where they might have more interest in more technical components of the project. And I think we would still be striving for consensus and not looking to have one voice or the other vetoing a particular vote, if I'm understanding your question with a more hierarchical structure. And then your second question in regards to the types of committees, am I understanding your question correctly?
Yeah, the types, and just thinking about, us reviewing a list and saying, oh, I have interest in this committee, versus kind of looking back and saying, of this committee, who would be the best person to represent this group on each committee? Like, where and why would we make those decisions? So.
Great question. I will ask if our Deputy Director, Monica Blanchard, if you would jump on for just a moment and maybe just give a brief highlight to what the HC3 represents to this group.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks, Erica. Thank you for being here tonight. My name is Monica Blanchard. I'm the Deputy Project Director with Odot. And so the HC3, so the Highway Cover Coordinating Committee, is the staff level working group where the independent cover team presents their work, and there's representation currently from Odot as well as from Metro and Portland Public Schools and TriMet. And it's really that coordination amongst agencies right now at a technical level, kind of going through that committee before items are brought up to this committee as well as the Executive Steering Committee on what the plan is moving forward. And I don't know if Gina or Nolan want to jump in with anything else that I've missed there.
Thank you. So I think that's a good description of the Highway Cover Coordinating Committee's role. It is first and foremost a staff committee. And the proposal back in November was that we should add members of the Executive Steering Committee and the Historic Albina Board so that there was a greater sense of transparency about the conversations that were happening at that table, and that there would be an opportunity for community members such as yourselves to be able to inform that conversation. We do meet once a week for 90 minutes. And so one of the pieces of feedback we received from ESC members was that that was a huge commitment for multiple members of these committees to make on top of the existing commitment. They also felt that given the technical expertise of the members of that committee and the fact that they are paid to prepare for those meetings, it may not be a fair balance in terms of the way that committee members, volunteer committee members could engage. And so creating a separate table, the Joint Subcommittee, where ESC members and HAAB members could engage in open conversation that is really dedicated towards them hearing from our consultant team and providing their feedback to our consultant team, that would be a better use of your time and provide a little bit more focus on ESC and HAAB member contributions.
Srinivasa, did that answer your question? Gina, I saw you unmute. Was there something you wanted to add?
No, Nolan covered it. Thank you.
Yes, thank you both.
Yes and no. I guess it left me with another question. So is the HC3, is that the only other committee that exists where you're looking for people to join? Is that correct?
Would be the HC3 committee if members of this group chose to participate. And then the new subcommittee which is a joint subcommittee with the members from the HAAB, the Executive Steering Committee, and the ICA team.
Okay, and then the Joint Subcommittee is the one that meets weekly for 90 minutes, or
No.
what is the cadence of the meetings for each of them?
So the HC3, Highway Covers Coordinating Committee, is the staff committee that meets weekly for 90 minutes. And the Joint Subcommittee is a proposal that was made to provide a greater level of oversight and coordination with the members of this committee and the Executive Steering Committee with the subconsultant team's work. And the proposal that the ESC evaluated last week was to create the joint subcommittee, and that those members would be invited to HC3 meetings when they wanted to attend. The notes from that meeting would be shared with them. The meeting minutes and agendas would be shared with them, but it would be voluntary. There would be no expectation, and that would be instead of formally adding members to the HC3.
Okay, that answers my question. Thank you.
And I'm not, if someone didn't already say it, the joint subcommittee meeting would meet once a month for 90 minutes. And then potentially if an emergency came up and we said, hey, we need your guidance, we could also call a meeting, but it would be a much smaller time commitment.
Other questions around opportunities to participate in the subcommittees? I know that we will not get to a decision tonight. The goal was to present this information to you, that you might have an opportunity over the next couple of weeks to take a look into the charter, that you would consider all of the information that was presented to you this evening, and that we could come to a decision in our next meeting. There will also be opportunity for each of you all to engage with me. I plan to, as mentioned early on, have consistent touch points with each of you. So in our one-on-one discussions, we'll have an opportunity prior to our next meeting to engage around further questions that you might have in regards to the charter and the additional subcommittee opportunities. Were there any other thoughts or questions around the charter? I just want to go ahead, Mr. Modica, thank you.
I did have my hand up. I didn't know if you saw it.
I did, thank you.
Keep trying to change the color of my avatar so it could be more noticeable. I'm looking for that fist.
Yes, sir.
So are you asking for our acceptance of the creation of the subcommittee, or are you looking for people to jump on right now? Because what strikes me is, are we going to be looking at, on an as-needed basis, creation of additional subcommittees and then thinning of the soup?
I want to be sure I am understanding your question.
So my question is, are you looking for agreement that this subcommittee should be birthed into existence?
Okay.
Today?
Okay. No, sir. So I want to clarify that the Highway Cover Coordinating Committee is already a project working committee. And so we're not asking for approval for that or the joint subcommittee. The Executive Steering Committee voted to amend their charter in their last meeting to convene this joint subcommittee between comprised of members of the HAAB, the Executive Steering Committee, and the ICA team. So what we're asking, or what I'm asking from you today, is to consider, in line with how we would govern ourselves, would there be persons from the Historic Albina Advisory Board who would volunteer to participate in those subcommittees? You do not have to make a decision today, though I'm sure the ICA team would love that. But I'm asking you to consider it in line with our charter and governance as an option for us to accept at our meeting number 3.
Okay, so it's clearer. It sounds like the subcommittee is already populated and you're looking for additional members to populate it from this group.
Indeed.
And is there any thought that an additional group of subcommittees will be needed given the different scopes?
I would anticipate that there is an opportunity for whatever level and depth that this group chooses to participate in. I believe that there have been conversations, and I know that Project Director Megan Channel mentioned, everything really is on the table, and we want to hear from this group as you represent various areas of this community. So if there's opportunity as we move forward to dive deeper into areas and opportunity and time and commitment from those to form smaller subcommittees, I don't particularly see that there would be a challenge with that. And we would see what we have need of as we move forward into the process. Does that make sense?
It's a little clearer. I still have concerns about the thinning of the soup that we have right here with individuals splitting off and then obviously being influenced one way or another in support of or not. But, you know, those are things that I wrestle with anytime there's a large group and then there's the division of task. Looking forward towards, you know, where's the ultimate decision and conversation about that decision going to come from? Every subcommittee someone peels off to join, you're going to create a competing interest for the larger group, right? It just seems that way to me. I am not eschewing the formation of a subcommittee or anyone that wants to populate it. But I do think given time to think about whether you want to populate it, let's not take a lot of time doing that for these separate subcommittees, and we're not going to get any work done.
Indeed. Completely understood and respect that perspective. I want to assure you that this larger body will continue to function, and that it's my understanding these the work of the subcommittee is for us to have a liaison, if you will, who would be bringing back kind of more and deeper information from the work of the independent cover assessment team, and be able to relay that to this group as we begin to make decisions moving forward. And that maybe the team doesn't have the opportunity in these meetings that we're having to present all aspects or relay. We may not have time to relay all of our concerns, but this subcommittee once a month would give us another opportunity to continue to have that dialogue with the independent cover assessment team and to influence their work. Dr. Richard, I see your hand up.
Thank you so much. And to my esteemed colleagues, good to see everyone. Also, in addition to Mr. Modica's comments about how these subcommittees are structured, my query is also around how far are these committees already into the work that they're doing? And then how will it make sense for us to show up not knowing how far they're along in their process? Secondly, if they're far along in their process in terms of their work, and these are, as I understand it, committees that are staffed with Odot folks, what actually would our contribution be? I heard what you just said, right? But what would our contribution be if they're already far along in their work? Because I feel like if I joined a committee, I would essentially be behind the 8 ball because they're so far along in their work. So, you know, again, that's just one of my raised eyebrows among many in terms of joining the subcommittee. Thank you so much. I yield back.
Oh, absolutely. And thank you. Nolan, I would love for you to jump in here in regards to Dr. Richards' question.
Sure. So the Hc3 committee, which is the staff committee, that has been going for several months since our team came on contract, and they've been providing feedback about how we can best do our work, how that work should be informed by other planning processes and coordinating with all the different stakeholders. And that is a public agency staff committee primarily. The committee, the Joint Subcommittee, was just created by the ESC last week, and its members, to the best of my knowledge, from the ESC have not been appointed. So as a committee, it does not exist yet. And in fact, it is starting to exist because the ESC has identified many of the issues that you have discussed today. How are we engaged? Are we going to be sufficiently engaged through these meetings? Is there another conversation happening behind the scenes that we're not part of? And so that was an ESC member who came up with the idea for the subcommittee. It took a few months really for that idea to take shape. And this is the process of it taking shape. So it is a brand new committee and no one would be behind the 8 ball.
Thank you. I'm going to, I see Mr. Washington's hand up. I'd love for him to go ahead and comment. And then I'm going to wrap up this section to move us forward. Mr. Washington?
I don't think it's more of a comment, and thank you very much, and good evening, everybody. I think it's more of a comment, not a question. Well, as I'm looking at the chart, right, I see two things that are related to the covers, right? You have the Highway Cover Coordinating Committee, and then you have the Independent Highway Cover Consultant Team. So do they work together? Is that come as a package right there between them? Okay. And so
yes, sir.
Okay. And this dialogue that we're having right now, it was two parts though, right? It was about getting the structural reality of what we want this committee to look like, right? Rather we wanted board chairs and all that, or if we just wanted a facilitator. My question in that process,
indeed,
do we relinquish anything in any one of those structures as this committee?
No, sir. No, sir. It will still be my guide, my job to guide us through the process, to help us to come to decisions, to help us move the process forward, and so that we can develop our own outcomes and relationship. So no, that is going to stay consistent, whether we decide we'd like to have a chair and vice chair governance structure, or if we'd like to continue in the way we're moving. And again, we don't have to make that decision today. I just want to present it to you all to be thinking about as you're going through the charter, to continue to think in that manner. And if we're okay with everyone functioning at this level and myself just continuing to facilitate the conversation, that is fine as well. Just wanted to present those opportunities so that you all have control over how you'd like to be governed.
Respect. Thank you very much.
You are welcome. So again, I want to say to you, please take an opportunity to look through the charter. We'll be hoping to get consensus or agreement around those elements moving forward. I do want to quickly mention to you an area of concern in regards to conflict of interest. And the conflict of interest is defined as any action or decision or recommendation by a person acting in a capacity as a public official, which you all are, the effect of which could be to the private monetary benefit of the person or the person's relative, et cetera. So that is mentioned in our charter. I just want to highlight that for you. Also, there will be, as expected, media requests. Some of you have already been asked to be interviewed. Thank you, Ms. Sharon. As we proceed through this process, to get your input, to get your insight, to get your voice in regards to working through this process together. So April DeLeon Galloway, who is the Odot communications manager for the project, will serve as the media spokesperson and provide official comments on behalf of the HAAB. So you are welcome to speak to the media directly, clarify that you are speaking as an individual, obviously, and you all are well versed and serve in many areas throughout the city, but I just want to make sure to highlight that for us as well. So again, please take an opportunity to look through that, and we'll have further conversation in our next meeting. With that, I would like to turn it over to the Independent Highway Cover Assessment Team. Ms. Gina Woolley will begin to lead us and Nolan through this section of the work.
Can we have the slideshow up, please? Thank you. Could you go to the next slide? So first, I want to just say that we are thrilled to have you guys stood up. You will be very important to the work that we are doing as a committee. And you're going to be seeing a lot of us over the next few months. And we are want to have robust discussion and input around all of the aspects of our work. Our work is going to be driven by community voice. So we're really happy to finally have you on board. Quickly, our agenda. Today, we are going to be, Nolan's going to be taking you through, getting you up to speed. I heard a lot of concern about, are we behind? Does our voice even matter? Your voice definitely matters to the work that we're doing. And we're really just stepping into the important part of our work, which is to engage with the community and to hear what thoughts and visions they have for the highway covers. And Nolan's going to sort of get you up to speed about what our processes look like and where we are, so you can look forward with us and really inform our work. And then he will also be sharing with you a presentation that was done with the Executive Steering Committee in November about, just to give you some examples and precedents of other highway cover projects around the country, so you can kind of see what the variety of treatments has been related to highway covers. Then Stephen Lewis and myself from our team will be talking about work session 1. And we will be taking you through just looking at how we're framing work session 1 and some of the kinds of materials, blushing, some of the types of questions and graphics we're going to be using to process community stakeholders in that. And then Morgan will be taking you through the development assessment framework, which is really our tool that we will be using to evaluate the outcomes of the development scenarios, and it'll actually be a tool that you'll use and that the ESC will use, but it organizes those so that you can evaluate the various scenarios, and then I'll wrap up with next steps. So with that, I would like to, if you can go to the next slide, I'd like to turn it over to Nolan, and he is going to take you through what's happened before you got to the table and where we're starting from right now. Nolan?
Great. Thank you, Gina. Hopefully everyone can hear me. So next slide. There were a couple things that we mentioned to you last time, but we had such a short amount of time, we wanted to make sure that we address them again for your own information, but also so that if you have questions, we may have a little time to talk about them today. So first is what are we tasked with doing? And there are 3 questions that we've been asked to answer. The first is, how can this project serve community aspirations on the highway covers in areas immediately adjacent to the highway covers within the area of potential impact defined in the EA? The second is, what modifications to the current design and configuration of the highway covers would be needed to reflect a broader community vision for development of the project area? And then third, are there other architectural and engineering considerations to feasibly promote economic development and growth potential consistent with the community's vision? So that's really what our team has been tasked to do. And the way that we're doing that is through 3 scenarios. Next slide. The first scenario is 3 scenarios in addition to what we call the base case. The base case is the one that is illustrated in the NEPA environmental assessment. The first scenario that we'll be developing is a new scenario that is physically limited to the boundary called the area of potential impact that has been identified in the NEPA documents. And it may be a little different in function, but it will be constrained by that geographically. The second scenario may extend beyond that. And so part of what we're doing right now is understanding what types of community vision might inform the ways in which and the nature of why that might extend beyond that boundary. And then the third scenario, after having developed the first two, if the ESC, as it has been informed by your committee and community members, if they see possibilities that we have not explored in those first two scenarios, they can assign us, we'd like you to study this third option. So those are the three scenarios that we expect to be studying. Next. We've just spent some time talking about the roles of different committees, so I won't spend as much time on this as I may have, but hopefully you all know the Executive Steering Committee. It is a mix of community members and elected officials. They have the formal role of making a recommendation to the Oregon Transportation Commission about the highway covers. And so they are the organization, the committee that will be directing our work first and foremost. The Historic Albina Advisory Board as you, and I won't reiterate your role. I think there's been good discussion about that from Erica and you all. Next. The Joint Subcommittee is a place where the two committees, a few members from each committee meet and have an opportunity to do a deeper dive into our work and hear a little bit more from us than we may have time to share at these meetings, but we may have an opportunity to hear a little bit more from you than we have time for at these meetings. And it's an opportunity if one of you has a question or if there's an item that comes up at these meetings that needs a little more work done on it, by a subcommittee to give us direction. That's what that subcommittee is for. And then finally, the Highway Covers Coordinating Committee, which we've discussed, is the staff committee that supports our work. Next. In addition to the work that we're doing with these committees, we will also be having community workshops. And we just wanted to highlight that the community workshops will be virtual on Zoom like these meetings. The nature of that is that it does mean that there's a limited number of seats. And so we are prioritizing voices from the historic Albina community and as well as engaging other voices, but that the priority really is to hear from the community that's been traditionally impacted. Next. So this is the process. The red dot was our kickoff and the start of our process. And the multicolored dots here represent work sessions. And the bulk of our work is organized around these work sessions. There will be 3 of them. The first one is at the end of this month. And so back to the question of, are we behind the 8 ball? You're really not. This is the perfect time to be starting these conversations because it will inform the evolution of our work. The first work session is focused on listening and assessing the possibilities and understanding the community vision. The second work session is about generating some potential scenarios, draft scenarios, where we say, how about these? And we get feedback from you, from the ESC, and from broader community about those, understand where they're working, where they're not. And then we have an opportunity to refine those and present the refined versions in work session 3. Once that happens, there will be a recommendation made from the ESC to the Oregon Transportation Commission, and the Oregon Transportation Commission would need to make a decision about whether to proceed with one of the scenarios that our team has developed. Next. So diving in a little bit more deeply about how these work sessions will function. Each will essentially have 2 major items. And one of them is that we will come into that work session with a tool called the Development Assessment Framework, where we take what we understand to be the values and goals and objectives and some measurable measurements about each of these scenarios. And we apply that and we hand that to you so that you have a little bit more detailed information about these scenarios. We will also then be using a decision table, which is your tool to help score and evaluate how well you think that these scenarios are meeting the community vision and its goals and objectives. And so we'll do that 3 times as is shown here, and we'll apply it both to the existing scenario that exists, as well as the 3 scenarios that we create. And each of these work sessions will involve 1 ESC meeting, 1 HAAB meeting, and 2 community workshops. Next. So that's a high-level summary of our process, and at this point, we'll pause for questions.
Eric, I assume you're going to manage the questions.
No worries. Yes, ma'am. I just unmuted. Yes,
Thank
we
you.
want to give, indeed, want to give an opportunity for those of you on the HAAB to ask any questions in regards to the independent cover assessment process. And they'll be here to help us answer those questions for you. I'm shocked there are none.
Oh,
Yes, Ms. Srinivasa, I see you. Or Estelle, was that you? Ms. Estelle, please go forward.
I just had a question about the development assessment framework. I kind of found it a little bit difficult to follow a little bit, just reading it. I understand, you know, what it is, like filtering it through, you know, what you've determined, what, you know, people care about in the community, but I just kind of wonder if there's a little bit more of a visual way to kind of understand it and see what's being looked at as far as, you know, what's being used. It was a little bit overwhelming, just some of the graphics that were being used, like with 10 things listed out in very small font, and then it broken out into one thing. And I was kind of thinking, like, every time that were brought out, like session 1 and then 10 things, like, is there going to be kind of a more condensed way of understanding or having that to refer to as we're going through the process?
Absolutely. That is on the agenda for later in this presentation. And so what I might suggest is once that presentation's happened, let's bring that question back up and see if it's more clear, and I will let you know that the intent of the presentation today is to get your feedback about how it could be more clear. And so certainly we want to hear your feedback about how to make it as useful of a tool as possible, because the intent of it is for us to deliver information to you. And so if it's not working, it's not working.
Thanks, Estelle. Are there other questions or comments? Ms. Sharon?
Now that I think about it, I read 87 pages of materials that you were asked. I'm like overwhelmed, but I want you to know the questions that were just asked about the size of the font and trying to follow took a lot of energy. But what I want to know is that what deadline do you have when I hear all of this moved in an appropriate fashion? The OTC would be, you're submitting it with an expectation that then they will deliberate and decide what kind of issues, what kind of having to go back to the drawing board, however small that might be or large. How much have you anticipated for a deadline? I'd like to hear. Is it a year out? Is it 6 months out? These various kinds of places where you have to have some decision making that actually informs the movement forward, because it's a lot to grapple with. And I know that you have the workshops and all coming. I just want to get a sense of what is that place out there, that marker where you have a new group to actually keep moving this forward, so I can get a sense of what kind of engagement is possible with your own timeframes.
So I believe the goal is that we would prepare the ESC to make its recommendation at the Oregon Transportation Commission for its July meeting, which means our team would need to be substantially wrapping up its work around and just following the work session 3, which is happening in June. And so the work sessions will be happening about every other month for the next.
Less than 6 months down the road?
Correct,
In
roughly.
February.
Roughly.
And I think the date is July 15th that we will have everything wrapped up.
My last question is, what kinds of issues, or what is it, money that might cause the OTC to reject some of the recommendations that have come from a full community process? You know, we just hit $1 billion unexpected revenue from the weed business. So, I mean, the state had expected 700 million, they are over $1 billion. So when I hear people talk about money, I kind of have a different take on it. So I just wanted to ask, what kinds of things might cause hesitation or pushback?
I love that question, and I'm embarrassed that we have not asked it, and but I also know that it's probably not appropriate for us to answer it, and so that may be one that we ask Chair Simpson of the ESC. He is an Oregon Transportation Commission member, and we might ask him if he or other members of the OTC can help provide an answer to that question about how they will be making their final decision and what criteria they will use to do so.
Thank you.
Excellent question. Are there other questions before the ICA team moves further into their presentation?
I had a couple questions about the community workshops. I was curious if you could talk a little bit more about when are those community workshops going to be held? How are you targeting and finding the descendants of historic Albina? And what is going to be the kind of process of bringing information back to the community and reflecting back that what they've shared with us in these community meetings?
Gina, would you like to take that one?
Yep, I will take that one. So I think that let's start with our process for outreaching. We have a list. We've reached out to about 70 organizations and community organizations and churches in the Black community. We have been very specific. I think some of you I've reached out to because you head up organizations that serve community. And we are very specifically asking heads of those organizations to help us identify a few individuals for our workshops. Our workshops, we're going to have 3 workshops. They will happen in February. If you remember the timeline that Nolan showed, they will happen in February, they will happen in April, and they will happen in June. And so we will also have a website, and that website will be, we are now targeting the middle of February for that website to go live. And then that website, we will share information that comes out of the workshops and give updates on that website. So people generally who are not in the work sessions, because we do have to limit the live participation in the workshops, it will allow other people to participate, because we will, in those online open houses, we will have the opportunity for anyone to comment on the same materials that have been processed with community in the live workshops. So there will be several ways for people. And then we will also have on the website, we will have a way that you can sign up if you want to get regular updates about what's happening in our process. So those are, that's how we're doing the workshops. I know a lot of people, Srinivasa, in the community. I know most of the people on this committee. I've been involved for a long time. So our major challenge is just that we're in a virtual environment and organizations are not staffed. And so just trying to reach people, I think it helps that I know people because I can call them personally. But just trying to reach out to organizations, people are slow, and we are very pressed for time in terms of doing this outreach. So our goal is to have a good cross section of community representation in these workshops, and we will have a majority of those participants. If you remember the pie chart that Nolan shared, that will be coming from the historic Black community or have ties to the historic Black community.
And Srinivasa, I believe, and for the rest of y'all's knowledge as well, that list of organizations is available. If there are groups or persons that you feel should have been included, I'm sure Gina would be open to that conversation in case we did miss someone. So we want to make sure that there's a great wealth of representation from the historic Albina community. Those of you who have additional questions in regards to the process, please make sure to jot those down. I'd love to be able to move us forward. Leslie, I see your hand, and I'm going to give you a moment to comment, and then after that, I'd like to move us forward in the ICA presentation.
Sure. I just had a quick question. If BEAM was included on that list?
It was.
Yes, it was. Is
Yes,
that
it
was
was.
there a,
Yes, it was. I sent a request to BEAM. I have not heard back from BEAM. So if you have connections, Leslie, and you would like to help make those connections, or if anybody on the committee has connections, that would be fantastic.
Yes, I live next door to Miss Noni. I will reach out to her.
Yeah, she has an email. Noni got an email from me.
She's
Okay.
just texting me.
I'm just wondering, just quickly, and I know we need to move on, but if there's a way you can share that list of who you have for those different sessions too, and if you're tracking like a secondary list in case those people drop off last minute, just to make sure that the in-person sessions remain full. If you need any additional support in sharing reminders and just engaging with those folks between now and these sessions, and if they're going to be the same people from this for each session or a different group, just let us know how we can support that process.
That's fantastic. Thank you for that offer, and I will invoke you. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you all. I appreciate your questions. Please remember, if you have an additional questions, jot them down and we'll make sure to get to them. And Miss Gina and Nolan, back to you.
It's Nolan on the to share some other examples of highway covers around the country.
Sure, and we'll do this briefly, but it is really just to address that there may be various understanding of what we mean when we say highway covers. So we wanted to show some examples of where they exist elsewhere. Next slide. So the purpose of this is to introduce you to the idea of highway covers, understand how different highway covers around the country fit into their respective context, and really to emphasize that highway covers, what they have in common is they all require some creative design. Most of them require creative partnerships of multiple different public and private parties, governance associated with that, and financing strategies to make sure that they get paid for. So this won't be the last time to talk about precedents and examples. We will come back to them and we will pull from them and others as they apply to the scenarios that we're evolving. Next slide. So the first example I want to share is Clyde Warren Park in downtown Dallas. It's a 5.2 acre public park that was intended to strengthen connections between downtown and the arts district there. It's one structure that covers a 6,000 square foot area with, a 6,000 square foot restaurant and performance stage in addition to the 5.82 acre park. And the park is open to the public, but it was made possible by a $10 million donation for naming rights, and it's operated by the private Woodall Rogers Park Foundation, which is responsible for its maintenance and programming of about 1,300 events a year. So in addition to the stage and the building, there's a children's park, a dog park, a great lawn, a performance pavilion, and 5 water features. Next. And it really does do a great job of creating an edge, a seam where these buildings and these parts of the city used to just look out onto a freeway. Next. The next project is Fenway Center in Boston. It involves development of buildings on a highway cover, and it is what's shown here is phase 2 of a larger project. I should mention that our local development firm, Girding Edlin, was involved in this project, so there is some local knowledge about how it came to be. It involves a 99-year lease of air rights from Massachusetts DOT to build a 90,000 square foot deck over the freeway that will support a $1 billion 2-tower complex containing office and lab spaces for life sciences company. And I believe this project actually broke ground for construction last month. Next. Hance Park in Phoenix, which some of our project consultant team members also worked on, is actually a rehabilitation of an existing highway cover, and it's called Margaret T. Hance Park Revitalization Project. It is a public-private partnership led by the Hance Park Partner Coalition, which consists of the Phoenix Parks and Recreation Department, the Phoenix Community Alliance, and the Hance Park Conservancy. And funding for this project was about $100 million, and it came from public and private sources. The City of Phoenix dedicated about $15 million of voter-approved parks funding toward the project. And then there was additionally a fundraising campaign led by the Phoenix Community Alliance and the Hance Park Conservancy to generate the private funding.
Nolan, you might want to point out before we move on, just on the diagram, where the cover is, just in case there's any confusion about that.
Correct. So the photograph with the red outline indicates the previous existing condition, and then the illustration represents the plan at a very conceptual level for this park. Next. So the Presidio, Parkway, and tunnel tops, as with the other examples we're showing, one of our consultant team members worked on this project as well and has great knowledge of it. This is a 1.5 mile section rebuild of Highway 101, serves about 100,000 vehicles a day. And this bridge over the freeway connects the Presidio and the Golden Gate Bridge Park, and 2 tunnels were built. A park was built over the tunnels that connects the waterfront with the national park. And so there was restoration of historically significant buildings around it. There was introduction of new landscape with a big goal of preserving the natural, cultural, scenic, and recreational values of the community and assets. And the Tunnel Top Park is the last step in this, and it's currently under construction. And if you click to the next couple slides, there's just some renderings of what this will look like when it is fully completed and built out. And one more after that. So these are some examples. If you click to the next slide, discussion, yeah. So we would just ask if you have any questions about these, and if there are examples that we did not explore that you want to make sure that we review, please share those with us. We are looking for anything that we can learn from, particularly if it feels like it's doing a good job of meeting what we believe to be the needs and desires of this community.
Were there any questions in regards to the highway cover examples?
I had a question, Erica.
Yes, sir.
I was questioning, has there been any studies in regards to the air quality before and after the enhancements have been made?
It's a great question. I don't know the answer to it, but we can certainly look into it and get back to you.
Thank you.
I had a couple questions. I put some of them in the chat. What I'm curious about is a number of these different park scenarios mention public-private partnerships. It mentioned foundations and corporations coming into these new buildings. And I'm just wondering if you have data that goes along with these different examples that breaks down if there was any real wealth building and investment for historically marginalized communities that came after these parks were created. Were there any kickbacks for these companies that were brought into these businesses, and kind of what is the decision-making lens of who gets to come into these park buildings? And then there's a whole conversation around philanthropy and the benefits to these different foundations that can come from this. And so I just want to know if there's an assumption that there is going to be a new park foundation or opportunities for naming and claiming and colonizing these new buildings that are going to be there in these new environments.
Thank you for those questions. There aren't any assumptions about what the governance structure would be here, or even frankly, whether it is a park or a building, and whether it's an office building or a residential building or an affordable housing building. There's no assumptions about that. So as a result, there's no assumptions about how it would be managed or owned or named or anything like that. We can do a little bit deeper dive on some of these and get some consistent answers about what their structure was, what the role of Black wealth creation was in them. But we're using them because they've managed to do the physical task of building over a freeway. And so there are some lessons to be learned from that. We are not intending to use any of them as a direct model wholesale in terms of the governance model or financing model.
I think, and this my last thought is, in terms of this process and ensuring that we do something different and approach it differently, I think that is information that we're going to want to have up front and conversations we want to prioritize up front, because if we focus on design without looking at long-term impact of that first, I think that we'll end up replicating some of the problems that exist with these projects that can quickly become monuments of gentrification. So I just think that if we should plan to have conversations early if those are decisions that will come later on.
And I just wanted to highlight Ms. Sharon's comment. I definitely agree that recommendations from the HAAB can highlight benefits, dangers. They'll be looking for your input in regards to what could potentially be, what the covers should be, what could be upon them, the partnerships. All of that is up for conversation for this group to present. Other thoughts or questions? Hearing none initially, Nolan, I'll turn it back to you. Yes.
One question. So,
yes, sir.
Mr. Edwards posed the query about air quality, and I want to ask, just for my own lack of understanding, there was an environmental assessment done. So can we talk about the difference between air quality and environmental assessment? And if the environmental assessment was done, why was not air quality included in that environmental assessment?
Great question. I wonder if Monica might be available to chime in regards to the EA.
Yeah, for sure. I think if I understood the question correctly, and was that so first off, the EA for this project does include air quality, but I think the question was more around, or the original one was more around, was air quality before and after and the other projects assessed? Was that, am I understanding that original question correctly?
Yes, that was the original question, but it certainly, it begs to agree with the environmental assessment that was done as well in regards to the air quality here. And so that's where the concern lies. You know, because we do environmental assessments, but those are only assessments. In reality, we want to know what it's going to look like and what it's looked like in other areas, as opposed to the environmental assessment. Because
understood.
when the air quality is not you know, not what it should be or what it was intended to be by the environmental assessment, it is what it is. And we don't want to get there and then have to do, you know, make corrections or say, well, oh, well, we don't want a Flint, Michigan.
Thank you so much, Mr. Edwards. And that exactly was the question I was driving to, because it looks like the environmental assessment was signed off by the federal government and the regional manager from Odot. It looks like on February 8th of 2019. So I just wanted to get some understanding, if there's time to do that in a very succinct and brief way, to understand the impact, especially if we're talking about the covers and things having to be built. How high are they going to be built? How wide are they going to be built? How would this change the actual cosmetic of Portland? Because one of my concerns as I sit here listening, and we talk about getting community input, where we have to go find Black folks to participate in some of these meetings to give input in a community in which the majority of us do not live. Right. So I just want to, that's why I'm asking the questions about air quality and what's happening here with this environmental assessment that basically said they didn't find anything. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. I yield back to Miss Megan.
I think he meant you, Monica.
Okay. Yeah, so I think we can follow up more in a future meeting. But yeah, I think that's best. I think we can provide you some more clear information in a future meeting. If that's good with you.
I think so, Monica. Thank you.
Yeah,
And maybe
that's fine with me. But I just want I want clear and concise information before we make decisions. That's all.
For sure. Yeah, the current EA evaluates the covers with a no build situation, so a park situation, and that's one of the things Nolan's team, he gave the 3 scenarios, one within the current EA, and then potential modifications to the EA. So I think we can gather some information and provide a more succinct presentation at a future meeting, if that's good.
great. Thank you, Monica. Mr. Washington, yes.
Yeah. Well, that was kind of, that didn't fly well. Something in that transaction, that conversation for me didn't go very well. Okay, and I think it was Monica, I think you played something down. I just felt like you was playing something down. Let me ask you a question. There was an independent assessment, there's an independent assessment published, right?
Correct, yeah.
In that independent, wasn't there a previous conversation that the independent assessment didn't go far enough?
So the independent assessment was done in alignment with the federal regulations, I guess.
That's where it gets a little sticky for you, though.
Yeah.
May I interject?
I guess, yeah.
Sure, Monique.
So one of the things that I'm aware of is that, we forecast out as a community, even though the past history dictates that the ears weren't listening, the volume was turned down. We are not unaware that there needs to be a new crossing at the Columbia. And so the conversation that I'm aware of is that why was the environmental impact study not done all the way to the crossing?
Right.
And whatever you put on the cover is going to change the thermodynamics of the neighborhood, the air quality, plume mapping should something occur. And all of these are things that, we reflect on the past history, whether it's the asphalt plant or the creosote treatment place out in St. John's. These things matter. I was also surprised that of the examples that was put up, Mr. Leonhardt, that you didn't include the cap cover in Seattle for the convention center and the hotel that is there. And that's been there for well over 20, 25 years. And Sister Spring's comment about generational wealth creation. I can't read everybody's mind, but I know for me, if you're going to create more real estate, which is a hard thing to do unless you're going to raise existing structures, must focus on generational wealth creation. And as I said at the beginning in our first meeting, the decisions that come from these bodies are going to last well over 100 years. And we have the burden and obligation to be looking forward towards that.
Thank you, Monique, for finishing that up for me, because I mean, we don't want to prepare a legacy that we're going to let our kids inherit lung cancer, though, at a higher severe amount. I mean, that's why we moved them, you know, try to block a lot of that stuff over here anyway, about routing a lot of that traffic onto the MLK corridor. While we got hundreds of affordable housing units coming in there with families, you know? I mean, so the question still remains is, I just got one question for Nolan, is it? Nolan, does those structures have built in some kind of exhaust systems or any kind of technology that would address emissions from vehicles and stuff like that on a structural reality in these types of things? Or do we just put a top on something and then build on top of it?
There's a variety of different approaches. There's not, the 4 examples that we showed don't have all the same relationship. I believe one of them may have that kind of management of pollution, emissions. I'm pretty sure that at least 3 of them do not. Some of them are pretty small covers, so doing it wouldn't make a big difference because the ends of the tunnel are pretty close to the middle. So I think a lot of that depends on how big is the tunnel and is it actually able to capture a meaningful amount of emissions or not. I'm not an expert on that topic, but I think it's something that we can definitely, as we develop these precedents and examples, we can elaborate on that.
So what I'd like to know is if the air quality would be the same with or without the top. Okay, so
yeah,
for me, in that distance, if you run in a half-mile tunnel, and then if you got technology that goes along with that, that's cool. But if you don't, and if the air quality is the same with or without tops, I don't really want to, you know, get a lot of, and caught up in that, because, you know, it ain't gonna make no difference anyway.
So our goal is that when we have our scenarios, we're able to give you an understanding of what is it under the EA assumptions, and then what is it under the 3 scenarios that we've developed so that you can have a comparison. Are they the same? Are some of them better? And you'll be able to look at that.
Thank you.
All right, thanks. I see one more hand. I'm going to go to Mr. Edwards, and then we'll move forward. Please continue. I knew this would be the group that would raise all of the questions and concerns for this community. So Mr. Edwards.
Thank you, Erica. My goal is to have cleaner air than we have today when this is all said and done, not to have the same air. The air today is not acceptable in my opinion. So when we're going to do something and we're going to do all these designs and all this progression, then we need to make sure that the air is going to be better quality than it is today at the end of the line. And that's what we should be about, because that, to me, otherwise we're doing a disservice to our community. So we need to look at that strongly. That's the reason I asked the question initially. And because that needs to come out, and we need to make sure that we're clear on our goals and our objectives here, because we can build anything we want to build. I get that, but if the air quality is the same as it is today, then that's not building to me. We're going backwards, and we need to make sure that this is a forward-thinking project, you know, in every aspect of the word forward, in regards to our community. That's what it should be about.
That's excellent. Thank you. I appreciate that. Nolan, if you would like to move further into the presentation.
We'll hand it back to Ms. Gina.
So this leads very logically into us talking about work session 1, because a lot of the concerns you're talking about are the outcomes that you want to see from this work. Can you go to the next slide? So I would like to share, I'm going to share with you some framing of how we're going to frame the workshops and the interactions with the community participants, the members of community that are going to be in those workshops, and yourselves from the advisory committees. You're going to have an opportunity to do this. We want to really frame this so that the thing that drives the development scenarios that we create are going to be based on the input we receive from the Black historic community members in these different venues during our work sessions. So what we hope is that you can help us define what are the critical outcomes. We've spent a lot of time here during this presentation of the cover precedents talking about air quality. So that's an important outcome that you said is critical to whatever we do on the covers. You want to see better air quality, and we will be able to accommodate that. Can you move to the next slide, please? So this is going to be our process for how we collect information from the community in our workshops, from you, from the ESC, and then how that is going to be what people want to see and what outcomes they want to see is going to inform how we create design programs, and we do design analysis, which feeds into the scenarios. So to Srinivas's concerns about, what are we creating here, and is it going to serve Black community? Or are we just creating real estate that's going to gentrify the area? All of this can be handled in the process by and the tool, the development assessment framework that we've created, which will identify the values that you prioritize that are critical to evaluate each of these scenarios that get created about how well they actually accomplish those outcomes. So this is the purpose of our community engagement process, both in the workshops and with you as a HAAB and with the ESC. Next slide, please. So in workshop 1, we want to learn what things are most important to community. You guys today have been raising things that are really important to you, like anti-gentrification, climate change. We want to share ideas and tools for what makes a vibrant neighborhood and potentially provides restorative justice to the historic Black community. We're going to use examples of other precedents with workshop participants to inform what can happen on and around the highway covers in the Rose Quarter neighborhood. And then we hope that you can help prioritize and validate the incomes that are most important to community, that the community participants can prioritize and validate those things that are most important to them to set the table for achieving restorative justice in the redevelopment of this lower Albina Rose Quarter neighborhood. Next. So our session is going to focus on, we're going to process people around identifying outcomes, and the ESC has already identified restorative justice as a major outcome area. So we want to identify what can create community wealth, what kinds of spaces, places, and development can create community health, and the same thing for community cohesion. And what we've done is sort of define each of these areas. Next slide, please. So we've talked about it in terms of how it relates to the Black community and the historic Albina community. And then we will, this is the type of content we will be processing with the workshop participants and with each of the advisory committees. And then we've identified a number of different ways that you might achieve or different types of spaces and places that might help achieve wealth creation. So I'm going to take each one of these items, community wealth and community health and community cohesion, and we're going to show you some just precedents in other places quickly. And this is giving you kind of a blush of the type of materials we will be sharing and processing in our workshop. We're in the process of fully developing all of the workshop content. So this is just giving you a preview and wanting to hear back whether you think we're on the right track. So community, Stephen will talk a little bit about examples of where else in Black communities, other precedents where community wealth has been created through, redevelopment and revitalization. Next slide, and Stephen, it's your show.
Good evening, everyone, and it's a real pleasure to be working with you, especially with you. And this meeting so far brings to mind President Kennedy in his statement that we do these things not because they are easy, but because they are hard. And this is no easy job right here. But we're at an interesting point in time in the reckoning where so many thriving Black communities from the 50s and 60s were turned under and erased by freeway work. And one example that I'm illustrating here is in Detroit, where I recently worked for the mayor, where this stretch of what's called the Avenue of Fashion was renovated. These are Black-owned businesses. They were marginally doing okay, but part of this work involved widening their sidewalks, which was at their request so that they could facilitate more outdoor dining and such. And we see a real lively patronage return to this neighborhood, and these businesses are now thriving. Also in the lower left, there's the opportunities always for a more informal economy on highway covers potentially, where there are food trucks, venues, other kinds of things. And on the right, this holistic idea that we need all elements of a holistic, healthy community, including job training, which in this example was rolled into an affordable housing project that was done in Los Angeles in a historically Black YMCA project. Next, please. And I think that the wealth equates to quality, and we have no reason not to expect that our housing, our retail, our childcare wouldn't be of a quality equatable to wealth creation. And so in these examples, these are affordable housing projects on the left, a childcare center that I did on the right, which just shows that with creativity, it's possible to exceed the imaginations of people and give them something that has real roots and legs. Next. Gina.
So the next area that we'll be centering questions and trying to help understand what the community's vision and goals are for what gets created in the on the covers and in this revitalized neighborhood is community health. And these are examples: culturally responsive healthcare facilities, access to parks and natural environments, active recreational space, community gardens, local fresh food market. These are examples, and Stevens once again is going to walk you through some precedents of where these types of spaces have taken hold in order to achieve an outcome of community health. So next slide, please.
So here we see just several examples of how nature intersects with health, and particularly in our local gardens, community gardens, access to parks for our young people in particular, and our seniors. And down below on the right is this amazing sort of experiment where in downtown Detroit, the mayor and local business leaders closed several streets and sort of reimagined the urban environment, put in basketball courts, put in other kinds of recreational activities, which just by their nature invited our local youth to come down and utilize that space and feel at all times that they belong there. This is not like they're looking over their shoulder for someone watching, to see what they're doing. They feel a sense of ownership, and that identity and claiming space as Black space is so critically important, and it's very sensitive. And thankfully, there's a recognition that we Black design professionals have a better chance at working with our communities and bringing these things into fruition than has been commonly known in the past.
Next slide.
And I think, safety and access to recreational facilities where our kids can go, and I don't say kids, because only recently gave up the basketball myself. I'm 64, so it still has resonance for me, and I'm sure for some of y'all. We're all legends in our own mind. We like to go play ball, so we have to have those facilities. But healthy food, again, in the neighborhood is of key importance, and that food and those venues be owned by members of the community, extremely important toward cultural identity, wealth creation, all of these things that intersect. Back to you, Gina.
Yeah, thank you, Stephen. And the final one is community cohesion. So we know how the freeway, the building of I-5, the urban renewal projects have kind of dispersed the community in all directions, the Black community in all directions. And so, part of what we think is critical in terms of whatever gets built on these covers is to try to understand what the community's vision is for reestablishing cohesion and a sense of place and ownership in that place. So some of the ways that you do that are listed here. And Stephen once again is going to take you through some precedents elsewhere in the country where these types of spaces and features have been used to do just that, to create community cohesion.
Great. So this happens at a number of levels, but it really has to do with seeing yourself reflected in your environment. And in doing so, the sense of satisfaction, of pride, of wanting to show that off. And on the left here, we have a wonderful sculpture by a very elderly artist in Detroit who is exhibiting in front of the Charles Wright African American Museum. In the lower middle is a rendered image of a project that was recently approved for Destination Crenshaw and the Crenshaw community in LA. Leimert Park and the Crenshaw community, as you all know from the movie Car Wash and all of the hip hop culture around Crenshaw, this is the epicenter of Black commerce and culture, and it's being celebrated now through a project that attempts to weave together all of the elements and provide opportunities for wealth creation and art and so forth. On the right, lastly, I want to just highlight, this is a wonderful project in Birmingham, Alabama, designed by a good friend of mine and deployed throughout the city. It's a historic civil rights trail that's marked with these series of signs, and their signs are sandwiched, double signs. The first one's a cutout, and when you view through it, you see all this great information about famous people that were key in the civil rights movement and learning about the history of the Black community in Birmingham for the entire public to see and to take in. So we have a lot of potential ideas on how you create community cohesion from an aesthetic standpoint. Obviously, there's a lot more under that fabric of that community that is required, but these are systems that all work ultimately together to really heighten and increase the desired results out of these three and perhaps other values that have surfaced.
Next slide, please. And these are a couple of examples of placemaking projects that Metro has done in our community here. And we wanted to highlight these as well, that these kind of small projects can be integrated into the larger whole. But they are examples of the way that you start recreating, connecting the community fabric and creating a sense of place for those who live in it or have been displaced from it.
So Gina, I just wanted to add one last comment.
Yeah, please do, Stephen.
What we just shared with you guys are examples of the kind of material that we're preparing for the community workshops. So we'll have a considerably greater number of precedent images to help people visualize how something we're talking about actually takes shape and looks in the real world. We understand that we can fall into our jargon and lose you in the process, and we want to make sure we stay grounded.
Thank you for that. That's good clarification. Next slide, please. So these are the kinds, this is essentially what we are hoping to gain walking out of the first workshop or the first work session, which includes our workshops. And we want to understand what types of places, spaces, places, and features should be included in a neighborhood that the Black community feels a sense of belonging in. Which of these would the community want to have created on the highway covers that would provide a sense of place and belonging? And what types of spaces, places, and features would the community think would best provide restorative justice? And then what outcomes does the community think will provide, will help measure whether restorative justice has been delivered through the proposed design scenarios for the highway covers, both short-term and long-term. And this is just our first pass at sort of what the workshop, how the actual workshops will be conducted. They will be 3-hour sessions. The first half an hour is going to be about getting everybody aligned technically, and then the last 2.5 hours will be about processing both in large groups and small groups, and then reporting back and understanding what things people feel are most important. Next slide, please. So the questions we have for you today, we want to take a few minutes and allow, hear your comments and get your feedback. And, do you agree with the framing the goals for the work session 1? Are there specific images and examples you'd like us to highlight in our community workshops that would help the community understand possibilities? And is there anything else you'd like to see us accomplish in work session 1 that we have not presented to you this afternoon? And Erica, I will let you open it up for questions and comments from.
Indeed. I'd love to start with a comment, and I do see you, Mr. Edwards, there. I'm going to start with a comment in the chat in regards to thought given to community and public safety. And so, Mr. Modica, maybe I'll have you elaborate on your question.
Yes, you caught me putting more into the chat. So what will make everyone happy that I was putting into the chat was I'd like to see the Seattle I-5 and 405 covers, the I-90 covers included, as well as the former World's Fair project up in Spokane, because it's a huge public space designed and intended to promote community inclusion, so on and so forth. And it has turned into quite an issue for the community with regard to livability and public and community safety, which goes along with my first comment. I think that our metro area here has learned quite a lesson from the South Waterfront project, in that not much thought was given to public safety and community safety. And it just seems to me that history will repeat itself if no thought, planning, or intentional funding is pushed in that direction. What we will end up with is extra neighborhood, extra population, extra commuters, and all of the issues of livability that come with those things. And then still expect a public safety system to handle what has not been funded or included in the plans. I mean, most of Portland is looking at 2035. Not just this project, the Broadway corridor reimagining downtown. You have got to include public safety, community safety in the planning. And that's from groundbreaking to finish. And I just, I asked a question to provoke thought, and to see if, in fact, the OTC or this committee will put some effort behind that.
Great, thank you. I appreciate that. I see several hands. I'm going to go with Mr. Edwards first. I do see Estelle and Pastor Richard.
Thank you very much again, Erica. Thank you, Kevin, for those remarks as well. And I apologize, I'm going to have to leave here quickly, but I think that at the base of all of this, to me, is education. And I would hope that when we talk about wealth, that we're educating folks so that they can keep that wealth. Because you know, you can give somebody a whole bunch of money, and the next week or the next month or the next year, they're going to be broke. On the health issue, I know there's probably not enough information or data to come up with a actual number, but I would hope that we're looking at mortality rates increasing for our people and making sure that you know that they're given the opportunity. Again, education is at the base of that as well, so that folks can be healthier and eat healthier, and I think that you know the issues like A1C. How many folks know what their A1C is? Those kind of things that our folks need to know as well. And they need to know why their numbers need to be low and what makes those numbers go up. Also, when we talk about cohesion, I saw a lot of artwork, and that's wonderful. But I would like to see an interactive museum that allows our young people to be able to go in and see our history and live our history, and be able to talk to folks that are no longer here, that built up Albina. And those are the kind of things that I would hope that we would keep in mind when we're doing this. I know this is not a social construct, but I think it certainly has to have those social aspects to do justice to our community when we're talking about restorative justice.
Great, thank you. I'm going to go to, I think that's excellent. Before I get to you, Stephen, I'm going to go to Estelle. I see you getting your unmute together. There you go.
Okay, and try to get my hand down too.
That's all right. That's all right.
Zoom newbie. Like, okay, I guess it's down now. I don't know. I'll figure it out, or someone will unraise my hand. Okay, I think I just kind of had a question that someone else already touched upon. I think it was Ms. Brown. Just concerns about the coverings. Just making sure that it doesn't look more like gentrification, because just kind of looking at the slides, it kind of looked like just more of the same. And I don't know, like, if I would feel comfortable going to places that look like, because, you know, Portland's not Detroit, Portland's not Philadelphia. So we could build those things, but what happens to if our youth is trying to gather there and use those areas if we haven't created or restored, you know, the creation of the restorative neighborhood kind of has to happen first before we're expecting, you know, people to go there and feel comfortable using the spaces that, you know, the coverings would create is kind of what I'm thinking. Because even like when I was trying to, you know, when we still own our house over there in Albina, I was asked if I was looking for work in the area, you know. So what would happen if people were trying to use those green spaces and use those basketball courts and those things if we didn't have more of a presence there, is kind of what I'm wondering. And so I just kind of think that we should kind of be thinking about those things if we're going to be trying to build art and build spaces. Like, we kind of have to be thinking about ways to get people back there first, right? Before we would create these freeway tops and envision all these things. Like, again, like the diaspora, like, we have to connect the people with the area first before we think of the design. You know, I think the priority always has to be, I read it, the ISDA's priority is the creation of a restorative neighborhood. So I think that has to be the priority. Like, how's that happening, you know, first before we're looking at, you know, I guess are the parks creating the restorative neighborhood and everyone's going to be feeling comfortable using them? I guess, does my question make sense? Because I just kind of think now, if we had all those green spaces now with the current statistics they're using them, I don't know what would happen. You know what I mean? Like,
absolutely.
that's my kind of question.
Makes great sense. Thank you, Estelle. Pastor Richard?
Yes, I'm finally saying something, I guess. No, actually, I had a wonderful conversation with Gina the other day. We were talking about this whole project. A couple of things come to mind. As far as the people that we've got, that you've made contact with for these workshops, how have we been doing as far as numerically getting some people? Are we getting a good response? Are people that want to be a part of this particular work that you're going to be doing? That's one thing. The other thing would be, is there a particular breakdown as far as an age range of young people that are there any young people that are being involved, say within, I say in the 30, 40-year-old range, or when I say 30, 40, of course, old as I am, in my range, are there people in their 70, 80-year-old range that are going to be a part of this, those two extremes? Because I think it's going to be important, obviously, for those who have some history that they could add to what things are being overlooked. That would be an important thing. And the last thing I just want to mention real quickly is that they mentioned, and Gina and I talked about this, and I think it is imperative that we take this into account, that there should be some sort of, call it a museum or some in a dedicated spot of this particular project that will tell the story of Albina, not only of Albina, but of the history of Black people in Oregon. Because it's more than just from, you know, the 50s on all the way up to now. Some of people who landed somewhere in the mid 40s, but like I was talking with Gina, my family or my grandfather settled in Oregon in 1914, well, 1910. My mother was born in 1914 here in Oregon. And then of course had an influence over on the northeast side of Portland. There's a lot of story that these young people need to know, that even though we had a very small minority of people, there's some people that survived during that period of time, and there's some amazing stories that will be inclusive for these folks, to give them some saying that we just didn't show up in the 50s. We've been here all along, and we've navigated a lot of the redlining and such of this nature. It will help them to be inspired to say that we can move forward, and we've got a story to tell. So those things are important to me. So I guess the one thing I'd want to know, what kind of response are we getting for our workshops as far as numerically people that are going to be involved? That'll be the one thing.
So thank you so much for that question, Pastor Probasco. We're getting good response to the degree that I make connection, okay? Because if I can tell people what we're trying to do, and that this is truly an opportunity for the Black community to contribute to a vision about what happens in that Lower Albina Rose Quarter neighborhood that used to be a Black community prior to the Memorial Coliseum being there. If we can talk about the work that AVT's doing, you know, they're going to take this agenda forward for sure. So if we can set the table with these covers to actually help move that agenda forward, what I have to say is that it's important for us all to keep in mind that the covers will not do all of the things that won't do all the things we want them to do or that need to be done for the community to restore justice. But the covers need to tell the story of where we're going, and they need to create that connection between the two sides of what used to be one community. And so I think that people can be a part of that vision, because we are going to lean on the community to tell us what they feel is important, and we're going to design based on that. So I would love if any of you, I'm going to make this offer. If any of you have people that you think belong in these workshops, I have reached out specifically to about 5 of you. But if you do, I would love to have those names immediately. We have about 20 people. To your question about young people, I've reached out to Srinivasa and she's helping populate it. I've reached out to Renee Mitchell, who works with lots of young people. She's providing names. She's actually provided me some names of some young people. So we have 2 or 3 stakeholders who've actually responded to me, who are actually identifying young people specifically to actually participate in this process. And I've reached out to a couple of folks that are involved with the Friends organization, which used to be The Gathering, which is really a lot of the people who are historically, a lot of Black folks who are basically been here as, maybe not as long as your ancestors have, but have been here a long time. And they have identified some older people that are part of that group. And so I have a couple of people from that group. So and then we've got people all through the middle. So the objective is to get a good cross-section of people across ages, across disciplines, coming out of different pockets of the community, because we're not monolithic in our community. So we want to make sure that we actually have voices coming from different sectors of our community, so that whatever vision gets created is owned by the community and by different parts of the community. So I hope I answered your question.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Yes, thank you. I'm going to take two more. I see Mr. Washington and Ms. Goodlow. Mr. Washington, if you'll unmute.
Sure. Thank you very much. Man, this has been a really fascinating meeting. I had a really insightful understanding of things and listening to some of the comments. I got two comments. One of them is the thought about the sizes of covers. You know, I mean, and it's been said, we can't restore every injustice that has been imparted upon us over here by a 5-foot cover, if the cover's 5 feet. But if it's enough of a terrain, and excuse me, Stephen, I often wonder where all them round ball pictures and images come from. But Stephen, you got to start versatile, being a little bit more versatile. Long balls, football is a different kind of ball. All right, them round balls, you got to do something else with them. Okay, so just so that I just need to let you know, everywhere you go is a round ball. You know, we ain't from no round balls around here. The other part, you know, just to lighten this up a little bit, because the Super Bowl, all that kind of stuff. But the other part is about restorative justice, but economic restorative justice too. So the thought about a park and all that is, you know, come on, man, people need to figure out a way to make a living, you know, increase upon the economic foundations that we have. So those things to me is about bridging, you know, it's about transition. It's about bringing communities together that have a gap between them. You know, so these covers are a transitional movement kind of thing for me. And I think that in my mind, I'm thinking that it should be about some money on them covers, that people should be able to somehow or another recoup some of the losses that they've had along with this restorative justice. And then, of course, it's been said too a couple other times, is that we want to create the message about what these covers are about. I mean, it ain't about, you know, the same old gentrification. You know, when I look at this plan and I look at the structural aspects of the plan and how the covers look, and the streets that you have highlighted, it hurts my stomach sometimes, man, because we got caught up in that Trader Joe debacle when Williams got ran right behind our back, right up the seam of the gut of us, and we didn't even see that coming, you know? But I think the bottom line is that I don't want our heads to get faked or get brought into just one little container aspect when there's so much more outside of that container that we need to be paying attention to, and how this influences all of that. Okay, so I think that for me, it's about businesses, you know, being able to have opportunity for, you know, because it's no complication for us to get affordable housing. Seems like everybody want to give us money for something affordable. Okay, but the reality of it is what's market value? How do we create a standard that increases our living, a quality of living in our community? And how do we use those things to advantage to grow our young people to have at least a little bit of money, you know? So I'm just letting you know. But Stephen, no disrespect. I appreciate you round ballers, but you know, the day is tough.
That's great. Thank you. That's why we have you, Mr. Washington. Leslie, I'd like to hear from you.
I can heave that other pill too, you know.
I just wanted to echo a couple things that I heard, and it's nothing earth shattering, but I live just a few blocks from I-5, from Tubman School. It's all walking distance from my house, and lived here in this house for 25 years and I've watched my neighborhood gentrify as people have moved in, and they asked my daughter, when did you move here? When she was out walking the dog. I've lived here since I was born. That's what she has to tell them. And I just wanted to echo the sentiment about building things that we're not going to be able to use, that people that look like us aren't going to have access to, can't afford to use, don't feel comfortable using. The only park that we can, still have any kind of control, if you want to say it that way, is Dawson Park. Every other park in the neighborhood is overrun with dogs and people playing frisbee football, and the spaces that used to belong to us or that we used to feel comfortable being there are no longer there. So whatever we do, we do need to think about that this needs to be available and comfortable for people to come back into the neighborhood, whether they live here or not, that there are spaces for businesses, that there are spaces for education, and that I don't know whose job that is to figure out how that stuff gets paid for, because I know that Odot can't pay for those things, can't pay for all those things, and housing can't pay for those things, and Prosper can only pay for certain things. And so as we think through, I hope we're going to strategize and try to figure out how we can support funding some of these wonderful ideas, a museum and art space and all of those things, so that it's not just a cover with nothing on it. So just my 2 cents.
That's so good. I appreciate that. Just to kind of tie up this section, Gina, I don't know if you had further comment, or Stephen, but I want to, again, just confirm, I think this is the right group to have these conversations, to begin to hold Odot accountable in the area of restorative justice. And I think that the creative brain trust that we have in this room will lead us to that. And those things that you're talking about, Leslie, the creative financing, what the partnerships would be in order for us to accomplish all of those things that we think would be vital to bringing and community cohesion, as Gina talked about. So Gina, did you have any final thoughts in regards to this area?
Just a couple of quick thoughts. First, I want to thank all of you for for this rich discussion, for raising your concerns, for flagging things that you think we need to pay attention to as we proceed to move through our workshops and then develop scenarios. And to Leslie's point, her last point, our development scenarios will look at governance, policy, and financing, so that if some of these ideas come out of the community visioning process and are outcomes the community is concerned about, that we will be trying to put forth as part of that development scenarios, different, a plan for who the partners might be and what kind of other financing might come into play to actually bring these things to life. So I think that hopefully we'll be able to address some of the concerns and the things that you want us to make sure get taken care of in our development scenarios. So I think
Indeed.
We're ready to the next point.
Thank you. This will not be our last opportunity. Continue to think through those scenarios, those issues. Thank you, Mr. Edwards. I understand that you have to leave. I do want to introduce again Monica Blanchard, who is the Deputy Director for this project. She is going to highlight our next presenter with some exciting information.
Erica, we had the development we have Morgan, who is supposed to be presenting.
My goodness.
Yeah, we have, so
we
want to handle this.
Indeed. I think at this point, Morgan, thank you for being here. I don't know that we'll get to the development assessment framework introduction today. I would suggest that in our HC3 meeting that we talk through how we present this information to the group. And we'll move forward with the Paramount presentation. Ms. Monica.
Thanks, Erica. You can go to the next slide, please. Again, I want to echo what Gina said and say thank you for all the difficult conversations tonight and being here. It's really important to ODOT, it's important to the community, and I just want to say thank you. And again, my name is Monica Blanchard. I'm the Deputy Project Director for ODOT on the Rose Quarter project. And I'm just going to give a quick introduction of the Paramount parking area of the project and then turn the presentation over to Edlin & Co. and Lever Architects to present on the development. So the graphic that's up on the screen right now is a conceptual graphic from the 15% design and the EA phase of the project. The Paramount parking lot and Paramount Apartments are highlighted in red, and the crossing over I-5 connecting Hancock and Dixon is shown in blue. In the 15% design concept, the Hancock-Dixon crossing goes through the existing Paramount parking lot where the proposed development opportunity is located. So last summer, the chair of the AVT board reached out to our urban mobility office with ODOT and asked if ODOT would be willing to work with Edlin & Co. and the owner of the Paramount parking lot to help realize the affordable housing unit development that was important to AVT. So ODOT was excited to help with this effort. And since then, we've been working with AVT, the city, and the Paramount team kind of behind the scenes on some feasibility in modifying this 15% design concept that you see on the screen here. This partnership is important to the project. It reflects the project values in action. So ODOT was happy to make this change to the Hancock-Dixon overcrossing alignment to provide the space for the Paramount redevelopment. And we've asked the Paramount team to provide an overview of what they have envisioned for this area at the meeting today. And then our plan as a project team is to come back to at future Historic Albina Advisory Board meetings to continue to gather input on what the future roadway connections look like in this area. And at the end of the presentation, I'm happy to take questions today or take questions that we can answer at future meetings. And with that, I will turn it over to Mark with Edlin & Co.
Thank you very much. On behalf of Albina Vision Trust, our firm, thank you for allowing us to share with you our combined vision for this pivotal property. Rich and Betsy Reese, who have owned this property for 22 years, have long hoped to see it and the surrounding neighborhood of Lower Albina developed into a thriving mixed-use neighborhood. When Albina Vision Trust first unveiled their plans for the neighborhood in 2017, the Reeses began discussions with them to determine what would be the best way for their property to fit in with that vision. 2 years ago, Betsy and Rich showed up on our doorstep asking for help. Their dreams for the property included addressing the issues and root causes of homelessness, creating a transit-oriented, design-rich project, including space for bicycles and pedestrians, create a design that's consistent with Albina Vision, find a way to shepherd their property under new ownership that will ensure it is developed and used in this way and if possible contribute to the building of wealth for the African-American community. And to help make this happen, Betsy and Rich will be making a significant financial donation to this Albina Vision Trust project. Specifically, our initial objective is to provide affordable housing at or below 60% of AMI to the Afro-American artists and others who historically lived, worked, and played in this neighborhood, along with a community-based performing arts center seeking to bring artists and arts back into the neighborhood. After studying the property, it became apparent to us that this project would be infeasible, as you'll see from some of the drawings that you'll see, without altering the Hancock-Dixon design as previously contemplated by ODOT. We've now spent the last 6 months working collaboratively with ODOT, PBOT, and AVT to arrive at what we view as a happy conclusion that you'll see today. We have many hurdles yet to cross, including securing gap affordable housing funds from the Portland Housing Bureau via the Metro Bond Initiative. but this is a very big step in the right direction. On the behalf of our entire team for this independent project, we want to thank Odot for the collaboration, flexibility, and creativity to work arm in arm with us to find a solution to enable this monumental project to happen. Now I'd like to turn it over to our architect, Chandra Robinson from Lever Architects, to walk you through our vision. Thank you, Chandra.
Thanks, Mark. All right. So I'm going to share with you the concept ideas about developing this existing parking lot that everyone's talking about right next to the Paramount Apartments. And it's really just the beginning of the design. So there's going to be a lot of details in the coming months that we'll be thinking about when we sort of further the design. So if you go ahead and go to the next slide. This is just showing the location of the property, which you also saw on the Odot slides. It's that red dot between Wheeler and Flint. And you can see Dixon just off to the west side, and that runs perpendicular to Wheeler. So you can see how the extension of Dixon would cut right across the property. And you can kind of see from this view how it's an aerial, and so you see the parking lot, and then you see sort of the C shape of the Paramount Apartments right now. So go ahead and go to the next slide, please. So this is really about zoning. So the site itself is about 29,000 square feet, but it would have been reduced to about 17,000 square feet if Dixon was extended. So the zoning also allows a building up to 100 feet tall, and residential and retail uses are allowed by right. We really explored a lot of different concepts. Why don't you switch to the next slide? Great. So these are some of the concepts that we'd explored, just some of them, to try and find a way to fit both a residential building and a theater on the same site. And it was very difficult, as Mark said, because the site got so much smaller and it ended up being sort of a triangle shape, right? So we tried to fit the theater underneath it or off to the side in another little triangle piece of property, but they were all really infeasible. So the cooperation between AVT and Edlin and Odot was really important, so we could actually look at the entire site and how we could fit a residential property and a theater all together in a really efficient way. So if you want to switch to the next slide, this is what we ended up with. And so again, this is utilizing the entire site. So on the left-hand side, you'll see a plan, and then on the right-hand side, you see two sections, two vertical cuts through it. So if you look at the plan, you see at the top is the residential building, and there's an entry off of Flint side. And then at the bottom, you see the existing Paramount Apartments, sort of that C shape, backward C shape. And in between is the theater, and also a path that connects you from Wheeler all the way through Flint. So that's what Dixon was going to be able to do before, is let you sort of continue your path across the freeway. So now there would be a connecting path between Wheeler and Flint on one side of the theater. And on the Wheeler side, in front of the theater, there would be an open plaza. So you can see in the sections, the top section just shows you that all of the floors from the Flint level up are residential. And there's one floor below, which could potentially be active use space, amenity space. It could be bike parking, it could be retail, it could be a lot of different things, or it could also be parking for the theater. And then if you look at the section just below that, what you see there is how the path connects. And there's some elevation change on the site. So the Wheeler Avenue side is at 101 feet. The Flint Avenue side is at 112 feet. So that means there has to be some stairs that kind of let you make that connection so you can cross through the site on one side of the theater. Next slide, please. So this is a plan just showing the Flint level. So this shows the residential entry on Flint side and the theater entry on Flint side. And what you get in the residential tower are 111 new apartment homes. So 56 of those would be 2-bedroom, which is family size. 1-bedrooms, there would be 20, and studios, there would be 35. And then the theater itself is about a 99-seat theater that's reconfigurable like a black box theater. Next slide, please. And then this is a plan showing the Wheeler level, so the lower side. So if you see Wheeler, there's an entry into the building from that side, and there's a connecting path that also lets you enter and exit the existing Paramount building, and that's where their entry is right now. So we want to preserve that and not change the way they exit their building right now. So that's why the path connects there. So the big plaza out in front of the theater and Wheeler is really meant to be sort of an exciting and activated space. And why don't you go to the next slide? Sorry, we only have 2 more. So this again is that aerial view that you saw in the beginning, right? So the concept for this site is to build a tower, which is going to have potentially really great views east to Mount Hood and to the Lloyd District and over Albina, and then west and south back to the city skyline, which is really great. And then you see the small theater right in between the 2 buildings. And if you go to the next slide, it just zooms in a little bit so you can see it a little bit better. But this is really showing you kind of the Wheeler Plaza. And the Wheeler Plaza, the intent there is to really concentrate a lot of the activity that's going to be on this street from people coming and going in and out of the theater and the residential tower in one area. And I have visions of the plaza being used as an extension of the performance space inside the theater, an outdoor space where residents of the building can hang out, a space that we could have a BIPOC artist market like we had in many areas of town over Christmas in some parking lots, but a really nice space that's sort of dedicated to that. You could have farmers markets and food events and block parties and really see people enjoying the space, see the activity that's inside the theater happening. And it could be music, it could be theater, it could be dance, it could be a lot of different things, right? But we really wanted to create something that was a destination and wasn't a place that you necessarily had to go inside to enjoy, but something that really activated the street and sort of engaged people in what was happening inside to really make them excited about it and interested in it, right? So we're really hoping that a design like this, and again, we're just at the beginning stages, a design like this could help to really energize the neighborhood and be a destination for people who want to come back, for people who want to help build community here and bring Black, families and excitement and joy instead of, just school buses and a doctor's office. That's kind of what's right next to the site right now, right? But to really infuse it with people's lives. So I'm really excited about this project to be a part of it. So thank you.
Thank you, Chandra, Mr. Eveland, and Monica for sharing. We thought it was important for you all as we will be coming back to get your input in regards to the design modification, also to make you aware of the collaborative efforts between AVT, the city, and Odot to help realize this vision for the Albina community. Ms. Leslie, I see your hand.
Yeah, I have a couple questions. So I used to live in that Paramount building way back in the day before I had kids. And I guess one of the things that's concerning about this project is that parking in that neighborhood is terrible, particularly when there's something, when the Blazers are playing, there's something in the Coliseum. And to add, not that I'm, against a theater, but just for you all to think about on a Blazer game night, what it's like to get through that particular part of town is terrible. And I lived there and worked at the Coliseum for several years. The other thing, I think that you said something about African-American residents, how are you going to, have you thought about how you're going to, because, fair housing, you can't, you really can't say, does African-American people can live there? And I know that you mentioned something about the housing bond, that you were gonna request funds from us at the Housing Bureau. But if you don't secure funding through the Metro bond, what are the other options to fund the project?
Mark?
Sure, all good questions, thank you. As AVT's first ownership opportunity. They're being very thoughtful about some of the topics you've raised. Parking in particular is one that we're keenly aware of. AVT is looking at a larger strategy for the entire district, as has been reported, and that is part of those conversations. So we recognize that. Additionally, we are in negotiations and have secured a contract to purchase the Paramount along with AVT. And the purpose of that would be to restore its historic character as being one of the last buildings remaining in the neighborhood. So we really see this all kind of working together, again, with AVT in the lead. And our purpose there would also be to preserve the affordability of those units rather than seeing the rents driven up as we're seeing in so many other parts of the city. And then your last question on the funding, that's a great question. There are other tools available, but right now in our city, the Metro bond money I view as a once, maybe a 2-generational opportunity to create affordable housing. We are optimistic about it. We're just starting discussions. I was emailing before this meeting tonight. This is the first public meeting that we have attended on this project. So we're hoping to garner support. And we hope that support will continue on with our application through PHP.
Thanks for your response, Mark. I want to be conscious of everyone's time. We are at 6:29. I know that I saw hands from Mr. Washington and from Estelle. So I want to I want to hear from you because you definitely matter, and I know that this is relative. So why don't we, if you can make your comments brief, I'll start with Mr. Washington and then Estelle, and then we will move to next steps.
You know, I'm really appreciative of the city and Odot getting together to do affordable housing. There's nothing better than having our people come back into the community and being able to have a place to live. But I got a grave concern, and I've been watching this process over the last couple of years now. And one of the biggest concerns is that we're constantly talking about economic development, but only one side of it, and that's the housing side. And somewhere along the line, if there's no retail spaces, we're just gonna have an oasis of people living, but ain't no way to make some money other than working for somebody, you know, creating the next domestic community or the next domestic population. My thing is that I would like to see more of these development sites have a little bit more mixed use in them. Okay, a little bit more business unit, retail space, these kinds of things. So I'm not, you know, and I like the way this process works. I mean, you can come and present under this kind of format and being able to get in line with that, but I'm not necessarily in support of any more affordable housing developments of this size if there is no retail space included in them.
Thank you for that. I appreciate your insight there. Estelle, do you have a brief comment or question? No? Well, I will say, as usual, I always expect that this is going to be an insightful and robust conversation. I appreciate you all for leaning in and being a part of the conversation. I realize that we could not get to everything tonight. And so I apologize, but I think it is important that we have opportunity and space for us to engage authentically, that we create those opportunities. And so we will work with the ICA team to make sure you all have the insight into that development assessment framework as we continue working with them throughout this work session process. Next slide, please, Ms. Natalie. So again, I just want to, again, this is part of Ms. Sharon's question. Really, we've kind of come out the gate swinging, and we're moving quickly through this first kind of phase of information and insight that we will need from this group. And most of that is geared towards the independent cover assessment. And so we will be working with them very diligently over the next few months to line up to that presentation to the OTC in July. But also keep in mind there are several other areas that we would like your input in, and several of the things that were raised tonight in regards to what we'd like to see as far as this community creative partnerships, financing, funding. We're going to be looking to you to help us create all of those scenarios. So just take a brief look. We've kind of gone through an onboarding process. I'll be looking to meet with you all individually and answer some additional questions, get your feedback so that we can continue to develop our time together. Our next meeting will be February 23rd. We are doing our best in the communications team, the OR team, to have information to you in a reasonable time. We appreciate your patience with us as we work through. This is a newer cadence for a three-week cadence, and so they are working diligently to provide that for you. I hope that those of you who ordered refreshments had a better experience at this time. We're so grateful to Mississippi Chef and look forward to continuing to patronize Black business. Next slide, please. Thank you all for your attention, for your time. Natalie, you can stop sharing the screen. I would love to see everyone's faces. Again, I realize this is a heavy lift. It's a commitment, and all of you all are the right people for this group. Dr. Holt, if you would close us out with some closing thoughts.
Powerful meeting tonight, Erica. Very well done in the process. Thanks everybody for your participation, especially our presenters. This just illustrates the significance of this work and have your voice and how important your voice is and the creativity that you bring into this work. Thank you for leaning in. Thanks for taking on the challenge. As we close tonight, here's something just to consider as we prepare for our next 3 weeks. We're asking you to make determinations around the charter and be prepared to make those decisions when we come back together. The discussions that were open today were just that. They were opening discussions. There are no conclusions around any of the things presented other than asking for your intelligence, capacity, wisdom, and investment, which is why you're in this space. And then thirdly, which you do so often and so well, and that's bring the authenticity of your intelligence and the courageousness of your thinking. Let's blow the boundaries away and not think from pre-scripted or predetermined spaces or places, but bring all of you into this space. Lastly, just a thought. We're together for reasons greater than ourselves. I think Mr. Edwards opened with it. This is going to outlive us. This is going to last beyond us. And so as we're thinking generationally. Pastor Probasco, thank you so much for contextualizing that we're talking all the way back to the early 1900s that's represented in this space. And it's also the reality that we're looking into the next 100 years that's represented in this space. That's pretty incredible to consider that we've been brought into this moment to participate in something this significant. Just let that sit for a while. In the midst of everything that's crazy and all the significance that's going on, we've got an opportunity to do something pretty significant. So thank you very much for leaning in. Thanks for lifting. Thanks for doing this work. We appreciate you. Have a wonderful evening. Bye-bye, everybody.
Good night, you all. Thank you so much.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night, everybody. Take care. Be safe.
Good night. Leslie, good night, you guys.
Good night.
So long, good night.
Good night.
Night, John.
You got to be old enough to remember that, right?